Yes. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and just a welcome to our services tonight. When I'm looking at the Torah portion for this week, I couldn't help but thinking about one particular verse. It's actually in chapter 23, verse 42, and 43. And these verses are they're very familiar to everyone. The verse says, we should live in temporary shelters, these are Sukkot, for 7 days. All native-born Israelites are to live in such shelters so your descendants will know that I, meaning God, had the Israelites live in temporary shelters when I brought them out of Egypt. And so I was thinking about that, is that Sukkot, especially now, reminds us of our journeys. It reminds us that we are on our way and that we should consider ourselves to be on our way to something better than what we have right now. Boy, is that a message for us. In the case of the Torah, we're on our way to the promised land. And on that journey, we will make 42 stops, but we will finally get there. We will finally make it. It seems to me as Jews, we need to remember that we are always on a journey, and we are always on a journey as long as we're alive, and that especially at this time, we should consider ourselves to be on a journey to something better. Prior to the Holocaust, Eastern European Jews built sukkahs. Wherever they were, they prayed for rain in Israel. In order to fulfill the commandment, they would even live in, or at least they tried to eat in their sukkahs. However, where they were, there was no shortage of rain. And by the way, it could be quite cold. The latitude of Montreal is 45 degrees north. The latitude of Warsaw is 52 degrees north. In other words, Warsaw is further north than Montreal, and it can be quite cold there even in the fall or in the spring. I know that in the spring because I've been there in April when it snowed. Nevertheless, Jews who lived in places like Warsaw built Sukkot, and they tried their best to live in them. They realized that they were on their journey to a promised land, a journey to something better. And I've always felt that on these journeys as a people, it was our women that held us together. According to the Torah, after the death of Miriam, the community was out without water. And this led to the rabbis to say that by virtue of her holiness, the well of Miriam followed the people on their journeys throughout the wilderness and provided them with water. It was Miriam, therefore. It was Miriam who kept them alive and together. Now, there was something called the Oneg Shabbat archives that were found after the end of World War II. These were archives from the Warsaw Ghetto, created by the leader, Emanuel Ringelblum. It was really a youth group. They brought together all sorts of stuff that they could from the Warsaw Ghetto experience. But in those archives, we found a quote from Emanuel Ringelblum himself. And listen to this quote. He says, "The future historian will have to dedicate an appropriate page to the Jewish woman in the war. She will take up an important page in Jewish history for her courage and steadfastness. Thanks to her, thousands of families have managed to survive and to surmount the terror of the times." In other words, even in Warsaw, it was our moms that held us together. In our wandering in the extreme deprivation of the Warsaw Ghetto, and in not so normal times, it was always the women, the moms. There's a story of a music teacher who was teaching young children how to play the piano. And one day a young boy came to her and begged her to teach him. The boy was 11 years old, which in terms of learning the piano is quite late. My parents started me learning the piano when I was 5 years old. But the boy was insistent. He said, "I really, really want to learn how to play the piano." And he begged the teacher to teach him. And she responded to him, he said, "Why are you so eager? to play the piano? And he answered her, I really want my mother to hear me play piano. And the teacher felt she could not refuse the young boy and accepted him as a student. And for a few months, he would come every day and she would teach him. And then suddenly, he disappeared. He stopped coming. And it turned out that later in that year, the teacher planned her year-end recital. She sent a letter to all of the current students and their parents, informing them of the date of the recital. By mistake, she sent a letter to the young boy who had stopped coming. Now again, in case you've never been to one of these recitals are meant to show how much each student had learned and improved during the year. Meanwhile, the boy responded to her and said, I too wish to come to recital and play. And the teacher felt that she didn't have a choice. So she agreed that the young boy should come and play. However, she put him at the end of the recital, hoping that the vibe created by all of her other students would carry the day. And when he showed up, he was not properly dressed, what I would call schlumpedick. It seemed like he'd not been taking care of himself for weeks. He was not presentable. He didn't look presentable. But sure enough, at the end of the concert, it was his turn. The teacher called him up, and as he came to the stage, there was a murmur. People could not believe what this young boy looked like and how he seemed to be taking the recital in not a serious way. So he came to the recital, he put his hands down on the keys, and he proceeded to play a piece from Mozart. And he played it with outstanding virtuosity. He played much better than the teacher had remembered him playing in the past. It was obvious to her that he had continued to practice and learn on his own. When he started to play, it was as though the crowd suddenly started to hear different music, because he was playing not only with his fingers, not only with his body, but also with his soul. And during those 6 minutes of that piece, there was silence. You could have heard a pin drop. It seemed as though he was not only playing with his soul, but that he was elevating the souls of those who were listening. And then he finished playing. And everyone clapped. Everyone clapped loudly because they couldn't believe what they'd heard from this man who seemed to be so disheveled. But at that time, the boy said to his teacher, with your permission, I have a few words I'd like to say to the audience. And then he said again, please allow me to say a few words. And she nodded in assent. And he took the microphone and he said to everyone there, you should know that my mother was deaf. All of my life I wanted to play music in order that my mother could hear what I was playing, but of course she couldn't. But I knew that if I could ever play music that she could hear, I would make her very happy. And then suddenly last year my mom got extremely ill. And I felt an urgency to learn the piano, and that's why I came for lessons. I prayed for a miracle. I prayed that not only would she recover from her disease, but that somehow or another the doctor would be able to fix her hearing and that she would finally be able to hear me play. But now I must tell you, 4 days ago, I lost my mom. The funeral was yesterday. And after I lost her, I was devastated. And as I returned to our house after the funeral, I once again saw your invitation. I had opened it up, but I hadn't given it much thought. But then I had an amazing realization. I realized that my mother was not deaf anymore. I realized that now my mother can hear me. And so I decided that I would come and I'd play in this recital so that my mother could now hear my playing. And when I played tonight, I felt that my mom was listening to me. And therefore I played the very best that I could. There's so much in this story, my dear friends, because the story actually represents, from a Jewish point of view, the essence of life. Because certainly, according to the Kabbalah, music is the language of the soul. But perhaps more than that, the story should help us realize that Mother's Day is a time to connect with our mothers. And that includes even if they are no longer with us. I love that picture a couple weeks ago, Mitchell standing outside singing to his mom. Oh, what love that is. I hope you're still doing that. You know, not all of us are mothers. I'm certainly not one. Yet all of us had mothers, and hopefully our mothers were good mothers. And hopefully we have fond memories of them. So if on this Sunday, if your mother's alive, call her, FaceTime with her, Zoom with her, thank her for all her support. But listen to this, thank her for the support on the journeys of your life. Friends, this will be the first Mother's Day in my life that I will not be able to pick up the cell phone and call my mother. It's as though I've lost her number. So I tell you this, if you're in the position that I'm in, that you've lost your mother, whether recently or a long time ago, I would encourage you to do the following tonight and on Mother's Day. Think of a good moment, a pleasant moment that you had, a pleasant memory that you had with your mom. And then imagine her standing next to you. And if you are Jewish, recite the Kaddish. She might be next to you, and see if you can hear her reciting the Kaddish with you. Because as you know, the Kaddish is a prayer that doesn't mention death. It's a prayer of praise to God. It's a prayer that, according to Jewish tradition, was sung by the angels to God. And there's this tradition in Jewish mysticism, in Kabbalah, that our souls, that the souls of our loved ones stand near us when we say Kaddish for them. And if you're not Jewish, or if you don't know the Kaddish, then do the first two. Think of the memory and think of your mom standing next to you. And then recite or make up your own prayer. Who knows? Who knows? You might even be able to hear your mother whispering words of love to you once again. But in either case, you should thank her for her guidance to you on all the journeys of your life. Tonight, I'd like to conclude with a prayer that was sent out by the Union for Reformed Judaism today. It's a prayer for the Shabbat before Mother's Day, written by Rabbi David Wertschafter. Beautiful words that this colleague of ours wrote. He says, to the mothers serving our country overseas while their children remain at home, to the mothers with children in the military who pray for their children's safe return, to mothers who labor each day at jobs requiring tremendous empathy and patience, to the teachers, nurses, doctors, police officers, EMTs, and therapists who come home each night to children who need help with homework and a shoulder to cry on, and someone to whom their feelings matter. To the mothers in prison, jail, or detention centers whose interactions are relegated to visiting day, visiting hours, visitation rules, and monitored by phone calls. To every mother who worries about the water her children drink, the air they breathe, the school they attend, and the neighborhood they live in. To every mother who has endured the loss of a child. To widowed mothers, divorcees, single moms, welfare recipients, and Medicaid participants. To the super moms, the tiger moms, the working moms, the stepmoms, the self-doubting moms, to mothers estranged from their children, and to the mothers who talk to their kids all the time, to mothers rich and poor, well-schooled, undereducated, straight, gay, bisexual, trans, mothers of every religion and race. To the new mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers, happy and unhappy, perfectly content and utterly exhausted. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you do, please remember this. We would not be anything, anyone, or anywhere without you. Happy Mother's Day from all your children. And together let us say, Amen. And we should be putting the names in the chat, shouldn't we?